Jesus went out again to the shore of the lake, and all the people came to him, and he taught them. As he was walking along, he saw Levi, the son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax office. He said to him, "Follow me." And he got up and followed. When Jesus was at dinner in his house, a number of tax collectors and sinners were also sitting at table with Jesus and his disciples, for there were many of them among his followers. When the scribes of the Pharisee party saw him eating with sinners and tax collectors, they said to his disciples, "Why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners?" When Jesus heard this, he said to them, "It's not the healthy who need a physician, but the sick. I came not to call the righteous, but sinners." A woman told me the other day that while she was driving the Kennedy Expressway at noon on Friday, September 14th, a very strange thing happened. Gradually, but almost universally, trucks and cars began pulling onto the shoulder with their emergency blinkers on. And the realization came over her that they were doing precisely as she was. They were listening to the beginnings of the prayer service at the Washington National Cathedral. No honking of horns, no obscene gestures. For 10 minutes almost, she reckoned, traffic almost came to a standstill before people politely resumed their journey. We certainly have become a national community in these past weeks, have we not, in ways we've not experienced for some time, partly out of a sense of anger, I suspect, at an attack on us as Americans all, partly out of a common humanity aroused by our vulnerability and sadness. For a time at least, with the exception of a few elite on a campus here and there, we've become one nation like we have not been in a long time. The Ad Council ad on television simply moves from face to face, young, old, dark, light, the faces of those who say simply, "I am an American." In our schools, kids who once resisted now join in the Pledge of Allegiance quite gladly. A common sense of unity, identity, obligation, that makes for national community in our land, for us as Americans. For many people, it does not occur quite that way. The sense of community in a lot of lands rests much more with ethnicity, tribe, blood, heritage. It's a given. You can go to Germany and live there forever and never become a German. We found that out. We didn't live forever, but okay. But for Americans, community has always been a project, a hope, an ongoing endeavor, something we have to work at. Which is perhaps why we renew community, sustain community and identity by getting together. Much more than any other land. The French do not have to get together to say French. We do. Tocqueville back in 1840 noted, "Americans of all ages, all conditions, all minds constantly get together. Not only do they have commercial and industrial associations, but they have 1,000 other kinds, religious, moral, feudal, general, particular, immense, very small. Americans associate to found seminaries, to build inns, to raise churches, to distribute books, to send missionaries. In this manner, they create hospitals and prisons and schools. Everywhere that at the head of a new undertaking you see the government in France or a great lord in England, count on it, in America you will see people." We do get together, and we've been doing a lot of it lately, haven't we? As Americans, I mean. Thomas Friedman, in a column recently in the New York Times, tells of attending the Meet the Teacher night at Eastern Middle School. My daughter Natalie's school in Silver Springs, before the teachers were introduced, the school's choir, a Noah's Ark of black, Hispanic, Asian, and white kids, led everybody in "God Bless America." The way those kids sang together. So he goes on, the terrorists misread America. They think our strength lies only in the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, the twin pillars of our wealth and power. And if they can just knock them down, we'll all fold. Actually, our strength lies in the slightly dilapidated gym of Eastern Middle School on parent-teacher night. And thousands of such schools all over this land. That's where you find the spirit, that built the Twin Towers and can build them all over again anytime we please. It's all there, hiding in plain sight. So I suggest America's sense of identity and unity is sustained by what our sociologists like to call, in their sophisticated way, mediating communities. That is, communities which mediate between the vastness of government and huge corporation and the isolated individual. And you know them. You can list them: the bowling league, the Rotary, the country club, the Odd Fellows, the garden club, the soccer team and soccer moms, and you can extend the list, I'm sure, on and on. Think of the boards, think of the volunteer activities that bring us together and help us to know who we are. And really, in many ways, at the heart of it all, the foundation of it all, the foundation of all this getting together, the community of faith. And without denying the presence and integrity of other religious groups, which really only constitute 4 to 5% of our population, I mean specifically the Christian church. For it is the Christian communities, like this one, which dot this land, which have had a major role in shaping our nation and culture. Not always to the good, to be sure, but mostly and in major ways. And I think there are at least 2 dimensions of our national heritage which have been generated by the presence of Christian communities, 2 dimensions central and essential to our survival as a people. And the first is our conviction about the grace of God, which is the conviction that every single human being is created in the image of God and is loved by Him. We've been singing a lot about the grace of God lately, haven't we, here and there? This is the revolution that happened in Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus strode the land in the name of his God, a God who breaks through the neat barriers which the religious establishment had set up between his favorites and those who were clearly on the outside. And that's why the religious found him intolerable and eventually drove him from their land and life. He welcomed everybody to the table of communion with God and neighbor. And he persisted in welcoming the marginal, the outcast, the unacceptable, the sinners, the kids, the women, right alongside the respectable and so-called healthy in-crowd. And in so doing, Jesus threatened the entire system of exclusion over which the religious hierarchy presided. And he still does. But with lapses here and there, this view of the individual as precious to God caught on and generated a history which gradually, inadequately, but surely broke down the barriers before the slave, the woman, the child, broke down the walls between cultures and races. That's the meaning of church. More than any other community around, to be one place and people where everybody counts. The ground is level at the foot of the cross. This is the gift of the church at its best to the America we love, the real possibility of e pluribus unum, out of many, one. As a result, we are like few other peoples on the face of this earth. But such conviction about God and His grace, such a view of the preciousness of every single soul, is not an abstraction. It can only remain credible and real and be sustained where it is lived out in community after community after community of place and real people. Jaroslav Pelikan, professor at Yale many years ago, remembers telling his 8-year-old daughter, or hearing his 8-year-old daughter sing, "Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so." And he reflected on the lyrics of the song and recognized they really did not fit the child's reality. She'd not read the Bible all that much. She knew that Jesus loved her because her mother, her father, her Sunday school teacher, her pastor, and a lot of other people in the Christian community had told her so. The Bible would come later. There's an old story I love about the child who I think got it right, the kind of community we are to be. The woman who taught Vacation Bible School had an experience she said she'd never forget. Her class was interrupted on Tuesday when a new student was brought in. The little boy was missing an arm. And since the class was well along, she had no opportunity to inquire about the cause of his problem or his state of adjustment, only time to introduce him as Davy. Needless to say, she was very nervous and afraid that one of the other children would comment on his handicap and perhaps embarrass him, exclude him. There was no possibility to caution the children, so she just proceeded as carefully as she could. As class time drew to a close, she began to relax a bit, and finally she asked the class to join her in their usual closing ritual. "Let's make our churches," she said. "Here is the steep church, here is the steeple, you all know it. Open the door." And then it struck her what she had done. The very thing she'd feared the children would do, she had done. Exclude this little unfortunate with only one hand. As she stood there speechless, the little girl sitting next to the boy reached over, put her left hand against his right hand, and said, "Davy, let's make the church together." Out of the mouth of babes, we make the church together as we live out the grace that knows to affirm and embrace whatever our age or ability or infirmity or offering. The role of the church is to keep vivid and alive, not just for us, but for the sake of the country we love and the world beyond, this vision, which is the foundation of the freedom and dignity of each individual person. So grace is our gift and our accountability. This motley crew that Jesus called together with his gracious ways are to follow him. As we are one nation under God, it is the responsibility of the church both to live the sense of accountability and urge it upon the larger community, because the unity and security of our land will depend in the long run not just on our power and ingenuity, but just as surely upon our moral integrity and sense of accountability to a higher court than any earthly, to God himself. We serve our land not only as we give our devotion and our lives even, but as we love it with moral integrity and moral courage. Which brings us this morning to this most characteristic act of this community of faith. Perhaps not so much among us Protestants, but worldwide the most characteristic act. We gather for a meal. Strange sort if you look at it from outer space. Solemn, silent ritual whereby everyone shares, without exclusion, a bit of liquid and substance that wouldn't keep you alive for an hour. And it's going on all over the world this day. Soweto, Athens, Monasterini, London, wherever followers of this man out of Nazareth gather. So what is it all about? Why on earth do we do this? Someone says, well, it's just a symbol. Never say just a symbol. True symbols are powerful, and they're not arbitrary. They share of the reality to which they point. And as they do, they renew and sustain life together. Think of the flag. Have we ever known a time since World War II when the flag was omnipresent? Car windows, antennas, streets, lawns, lapels, telephone poles, light poles, pins. Now I ask you, if I were to bring a flag up here this morning and proceed to burn it, I know full well what your reaction would be, deservedly. And if I said to you, well, what's the fuss? It's just a symbol. You know, just a piece of cloth. You know? I doubt very much that you would understand. Over the internet this week, I'm the flag of the United States of America. I fly atop the world's tallest buildings. I stand watch in America's halls of justice. I stand guard around the world. I stand for peace and honor and truth and justice. I stand for freedom. I fought in every battle of every year for more than 200 years, Valley Forge, Gettysburg, the trenches of France, the Argonne Forest, Anzio, Normandy. I was there. I led my troops, dirty, battle-worn and tired. When I'm flown at half-mast to honor my countrymen, or when I lie in the trembling arms of a grieving parent at the grave of their fallen son or daughter, I am there. What does the flag do? Does it not bring us together as a people? Does it not bind us a little tighter to the values for which we stand? Now, can you believe it? Bread and wine in the hands of Jesus are symbols which remind us of who we are as Christians and bind us to the faith for which we are to live. I mean, bread, what is it? It is grace. It's the gift of life. Just ask those hundreds of thousands of poor Afghanistans what it is. It's the difference between life and death. And as we lift it up and bless it and break it in a moment, we say, this bread, all bread, gracious gift of God, life itself. Sure, we're involved by the sweat of our brow and the cleverness of Archer Daniel Midland, but ultimately it's all from God. You can't manufacture bread. Although I've eaten some that suggest somebody has tried. So we take it in all simplicity, we take it, look at it quietly, reverently, and remember to wonder at the grace of life, which we have not deserved, my friends, but which comes nevertheless, day after day. And we say, thank you. No less the wine, the water of body and soul, these simple and symbolic elements of life, and this simple and symbolic act by which we receive and share can reconstitute us and sustain us again and again as community of faith. As we sense behind the outward and visible, the invisible presence and grace of God, which sustains all of us, both in body and spirit, with each new day. And there's call to accountability here too, as well, to share God's grace with each other in our common life here and beyond these doors. And it can lead us, again, to live in and pray for that larger community, the people of this table all over this country and all over this world. I remember one moment about 4 years ago when the symbols really became reality for me in a very special way. A group that we led went by bus to St. Francis Episcopal Church in Soweto, a city of 1.5 million blacks near Johannesburg, South Africa. And we were warmly received, and we felt immediately that we were with family. One small difference between us and them lay in the fact that their service lasted 3 hours. Another small difference rested in the fact that they celebrated Holy Communion with a common cup. Most of our people did go forward to receive. But I was a little anxious about that common cup, I tell you, in a land with an AIDS epidemic raging outside the doors. So I tried to fudge it. I really didn't want to drink from that cup. So I said to myself, I'll just take the wafer, and then I'll hold it until the cup comes by, and then I'll just dip it in. But when I took the wafer and knelt there holding it, waiting, the beautiful black lady kneeling tight up next to me looked at me with a smile and said with motherly-like command, "Put it in your mouth." The body of Christ, put it in your mouth. Guess what I did? I put it in my mouth. And when the cup came, she drank, and I drank, and we were one. Against my small anxiety, I learned a bit of trust and gratitude that I'd not felt before. I became part of the same family. Now, I tell you that because in a way that's what we seek every time we come to this God and His Son and this table. We bring our anxieties, large or small, and we eat together, and we embrace life together. We trust. So as Christians, we live in the community of the table of God's grace, for the community of the Stars and Stripes, and the community of humankind. In 1918, at the end of World War, Sir Cecil Spring Rice, a British ambassador to our countries, sat down on the night before he was to sail to England, terminally ill, and penned these lines: I vow to thee, my country, all earthly things above, entire and whole and perfect, the service of my love, the love that does not question, the love that stands the test, that lays upon the altar the dearest and the best, the love that never falters, the love that pays the price, the love that makes undaunted a final sacrifice. But there's another country I heard of long ago, most dear to them that love her, most great to them that know. We may not count her armies, we may not see her king, her fortress is a faithful heart, her pride is suffering, and soul by soul and silently her shining bounds increase, and her ways are ways of gentleness, and all her paths are peace.